Ladies and gentlemen, hope you're doing all right, man. Lockdown, been about 10 days, feels like a year. Everyone's going crazy. Can't go shopping, man. There's nothing on the shelves, man. Buying food online. Oh well, let's do this, man. Part two of Yoni Applebaum's essay, How America Ends. Let's look at today. Now, this is part two. We want to look at some essay strategies, some sample thesis statements. Let's write an argumentative thesis for English 1C about the role of massive demographic shifts. Ladies and gentlemen, America is becoming more diverse, and a lot of people don't like it. And that's what this essay is about. And the old guard, that wants America to be dominated by the past when it was a all white dominated society. They can see their world is passing by and they want to cling to the past, and they're erecting this sort of populist cult, and with certain sayings, "Make America Great Again" and whatnot. And that's the nutshell of this argument. And the scary thing about this essay is that this cult, they'll they'll do whatever the cost is, and there are dangerous outcomes. I mean, they're electing racist demagogues to high office. They're enabling racists who commit acts of violence, such as we saw at the Charlottesville race riot with white guys holding torches, chanting, "They will not replace us." They're weaponizing fake news. I mean, there are cable channels that are pretty popular. I mean, that just deliver fake news 24/7. The only consolation is that the viewership of, I'm thinking of a station in particular. I'm not even going to mention it. I don't feel like mentioning it, ladies and gentlemen. The viewership is like white people over the age of 75. Not a good demographic for your long-term hopes. So, but they deliver weaponized fake news. Not good in the age of COVID-19 virus when you need people to be safe and you've got a fake news station saying that it's a hoax. And even though the station is now on board saying that COVID-19 is a threat, its viewers are still not believing it. There seems to be a gap from all the reports I'm reading. So the gap is so big. Look at this Wired article on just COVID-19. Even that's been politicized in the context of how America ends. According to an NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll, only 40% of Republicans believe the coronavirus is a real threat, compared to 76% of Democrats. Now, I mean, for me, I'm not a political type of guy. I'm just stating facts. You can make whatever inferences you want. 54% of Republicans say the virus is blown out of proportion, and that is consistent with earlier polling suggesting the Republicans are twice as likely as Democrats to call reports about the seriousness of the COVID-19 outbreak generally exaggerated. Ladies and gentlemen, even the virus that's got us in lockdown is political in this country. There are places that, based on political worldviews, people are saying, "Ah, it ain't no big deal, man. Just do your thing," and that's really quite something. The old white guard, man. They want to abandon democratic principles and are turning to fascism and fascist leaders. They'll elect leaders who lock up babies in cages at borders, separate families. This is the war that we're in. It's a political war. It's disturbing. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. I'm a pretty old dude. I'm getting up there, ladies and gentlemen. You don't even want to know. So even though we stand at the abyss, Applebaum says there's hope. He says there are large numbers of conservatives who want to bring their party back to principles, not this cult, this race identity cult. Uh, I hope he's right. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. Applebaum, you're a smart dude. I don't know if you have a crystal ball either, though. But let's look at some sample thesis statements for our students. All right, here's one I would do. So, while Applebaum could better clarify his points by showing that America's race war is in part a cultural war. He makes a persuasive argument that America's existential crisis, I mean, we're on the brink of life or death, ladies and gentlemen, is that the right is so desperate to fight diversity that it is relying on fascist principles and methods, including electing racist demagogues with no political experience to high office, giving the green light to racist extremist groups to come out of the woodwork, weaponizing fake news in order to own the libs, and rejecting science based evidence as a liberal conspiracy. For your outline, your introduction, you would summarize the essay's major points. Uh, your thesis, argue for or against Applebaum's claim that the white old guard is imposing fascism on democracy. I mean, just looking at that, man, I'm the type of guy that I try to avoid calling an entity fascist because it's almost a cliche. But to be fair to Applebaum, he's just stating facts. There has been a trend to white ethnic fascism in America in the last 4 years. Paragraphs 3 through 6 address the following outcomes as being logical grounds for Applebaum's claim, which we went over up here in this thesis. All these reasons you could break down into paragraphs 3 through 6. Electing racist demagogues, giving the green light to racist extremist groups, weaponizing fake news, rejecting science-based evidence. For your counterargument, your opponents might claim that the warnings of racism and fascism are exaggerated, that the left has its own fascism and fake news. And for your rebuttal, you might consider the whataboutism fallacy. Have you ever heard of that? What about? What about? Which is that two wrongs don't make a right. It's a diversionary tactic. If you point out that a group of people are doing something wrong, sometimes they don't want to address what they're doing. They'll just turn around and say, hey, what about the time you did this? And that's really not a logical construction at all. Conclusion is a powerful restatement of your thesis. Now, another thesis you could look at is that this one is a little more hopeful. A little more hopeful. Here you're saying that we could get out of this mess. You're saying, while there's much to despair in Applebaum's essay, and I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, it was really tough to read this essay being cooped up in the COVID-19 lockdown and looking at the political division on COVID-19 specifically as I read this essay. It gave this essay more context and more urgency. Anyways, I digress. While there is much to despair in Applebaum's essay, there is at the same time ample historical evidence to show that America will overcome its racial and cultural war and find a truce so that democracy may survive. And here's some three supporting paragraphs I think you could look at. Number one, this pandemic we're in, it's going to force us to unify for our own survival. You know, those who are politically in denial about this pandemic, they're gonna have relatives and friends who are going to succumb to this virus, and they're going to see that this is not a joke. This is not some affectation, some invention. They're going to see this is a real situation, and their reckless behavior, hanging out with other people and spreading the virus, has consequences. So I think eventually this pandemic, man, if we lose a couple million people to this, people are going to see this is not a joke at all, man. This is really serious. Uh, the populist cult, that is the old guard, this racist, populist, white nationalist, old guard cult, it's going to be short lived because Americans are going to find we can't compete on the international stage if we remain isolationist. We'll just diminish in power over time. And a third point is that, you know what, growing diversity it's not going to stop, and eventually it's going to crush the old guard. They're on life support, and they're doing desperate things, but eventually they're going to go away. And so those would be three pretty compelling arguments to look at. Of course, as a counter argument, you could say the cult has put in judges to kill democracy over the long term. So it doesn't matter if they die or not. They already loaded the courts with their cultish judges, and you could argue that. And they're already you could say there's another counter argument. You could say the cult has used voter suppression to kill democracy. Even if you have the demographics to to beat this cult, if they keep suppressing the vote with all these draconian voter ID laws, uh, then it's going to help them survive. I mean, honestly, it's a matter of time before this cult dies. But for for the rest of us, we don't have all day, man. We need the cult to end sooner than later. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's the end of the situation. Tell me what you think. I hope you're doing all right, man. Locked up in your house. Uh, it's insane. I'm going to go do a kettlebell workout. And I'm so alone, I'm going to put a full length mirror in there so I have a training partner. Except I'll probably find that training partner annoying. You know how that is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, I'm out.